So welcome to Driving New Revenue in the New Normal. I'll be your moderator today. My name is Jason Georgiorian, and I'm a principal at LGA Architecture. So let's start with a little bit of background. We created the Fireside Chats series as our way of providing a resource and a service to our community during this pandemic. Last month, we had the topic of reopening our institutions, and we heard a lot of great key concepts from that chat. We learned about hybrid business models, which are a combination of applying online services with traditional in-person services. And our cultural institution leaders talked about how they need to be adaptable and fluid between both of those worlds. So we also heard about the economic and financial challenges our institutions are having during this crisis. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today as our topic. We have another great group of panelists for you, and we'll learn ways our institutions can sustain themselves and find new revenue streams while serving the limited capacity audiences and visitors. So a little bit of housekeeping before we start. Everyone is muted as an attendee. However, we have a Q&A button, and we really encourage you to ask questions. And we'll try to get those questions answered before this session is over. And you can send those questions directly to me or to the group. It really doesn't matter. We are recording this chat, and you'll receive an email in a few days with a link to this recording. In addition, we'll provide a link to our past Fireside Chat and webinar series. So if you want to get caught up, that'll be a great way to do so. And finally, if you're having any trouble seeing this webinar, we suggest going to full screen mode. We find that's the best way to do this. And I really hope you enjoy the conversation. So let's turn it over to Craig to get us kicked off.
Great, thanks, Jason. I want to first thank our panelists for taking the time to do this and to help enlighten us on a lot of things that a lot of institutions are going through, and these guys are no exception. They're going through the same thing, and we find that we could always learn a lot from each other. So I'm going to jump right into this. I'm going to ask our three panelists, Mike Devine, Myron Martin, and Jonathan Ullman. I'm going to ask them to quickly introduce themselves, but also to introduce the institutions that you work with, because I know we do have people from out of town on this webinar, and they may not completely be familiar with everything here in Las Vegas. So if you guys could do that, if we go ahead and start with Mike, please.
Great, thanks, Craig. My name is Mike Devine. I'm president of Gallagher Museum Services, which is a division of Gallagher & Associates. Gallagher & Associates is a cultural attraction planning and design firm. The majority of our firm focuses on the physical and digital design, mainly in museums. Our group, Gallagher Museum Services, then complements that with financial, business, and operational planning. And we work with clients from the initial idea through post-opening. We work with many clients that are going through a major renovation. And then we act as an outsourced CFO or COO for several institutions as well.
Good. Thanks, Mike. How about you, Myron? Can you give us a little introduction?
I would be happy to. Thanks, Craig. It's Myron Martin. I'm the president and CEO of the Smith Center. For those who may be tuning in from out of town, it's the performing arts center that's been named in the top 10 in the world by Polestar magazine, been called by locals the heart of the arts, and we are heartbroken that we are dark right now, but I'm sure we'll get into that as we talk a little more. So thanks for having me, Craig.
Great. Thank you, Myron. Jonathan.
Great. Thanks, Craig. Jonathan Ullman, I'm the president and CEO of the Ma Museum. For those unfamiliar, we are a museum that operates in downtown Las Vegas in the former U.S. Post Office and Federal Courthouse, historic building, beautiful building that we renovated and opened in February of 2012. AAM accredited. We did that within 5 years of opening. Pretty proud of that accomplishment. And our visitation, we've crossed 2.5 million people Did over 400,000 in 2019, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful museum.
Great, thanks. Well, let's jump right into the questions, guys. You know, we've all been struggling with lots of things going through this pandemic, from figuring out how to work from home, from not being able to go to our favorite places, to not be able to get our cultural fix. It's been a challenge for everybody, but for you who run these facilities, I imagine the challenges have been exponential compared to us that just are the visitors. So I'm going to ask, and I'll start with Jonathan, and I'm going to try to ask the same question, but a little bit differently, because Jonathan is open again, and Myron, you're not, and Mike is working with institutions that are both open and some that aren't yet. And so what operational adjustments did you make, Jonathan, during this kind of closure period?
Well, you know, first thing I want to say, Craig, is we are open, and I just want to say for Myron, we think about you more than you know. This has been an incredible time that we've all gone through, and Craig, I think you know, it's just looking back on the last 3 months. So it was you know, for us, March 15th was the last day we operated. You know, we came out of an unbelievable February. You know, our historic highs in terms of attendance, kind of firing on all cylinders. You know, 14 straight months of best months ever, and great growth. And we were looking ahead. And then we closed on March 16th and didn't open again until May 29th. And during that time, you know, our focus was really in four main areas. First, you know, making certain that we were still maintaining an external presence. So all of a sudden, you know, just because you close your doors, you know, last thing you want to do is to be out of everybody's, you know, the public's mind. So, so we were very concerned about how do we maintain an external presence. We were, you know, obviously extremely concerned about creating a safety plan so that when we would reopen again, we would be able to assure people that it was a healthy environment to come to. And, you know, we saw that as you know, really being paramount. I mean, it's a necessary condition to be able to operate again. So it was also a wake-up call for us, you know, in terms of revenue. You know, that you know, you always think about diversifying your revenue streams. This was the first time that we really ever considered, you know, how do you generate revenue when you're not open at all? So that's and that is that's not something that you can solve overnight by any means, but that, you know, is certainly an area of focus that we started to concentrate on. And then I think the, you know, the fourth area that we were devoting a lot of attention to is once you are able to open again, you have that comprehensive safety plan in place so that people can feel okay about coming back. How do you create a sense of urgency around that? Because just because people can come back doesn't mean that they will, and it doesn't mean that they will anytime soon. So, you know, and throughout that whole period too, you know, I think, you know, another underlying piece of this, you know, when you're on the other side, you look back on it and you don't think about all of the uncertainty that surrounds how are we going to get through these next, you know, these coming days? How do we keep our people? What's the you know, what's the approach that we need to take to, you know, effectively, you know, remain viable? So there was an awful lot of time and energy devoted to other funding sources and understanding the legislative support that's available and such. But then to just kind of tie it back to the actual operations, and most of this is about the safety planning. You know, really a significant transformation for the operations of the museum. You know, there's a whole new queuing space that we have that we basically commandeered a wing out of our retail store so that we could space people out, so that we could have a wellness check, so that we could make certain that there was a queue that would keep people apart And if there was a wait to get through that, that it would also be entertaining and start the experience off on the right foot. But all sorts of other, changes to the museum, the exhibits, so that we could better manage the flow and de-densify the different exhibit spaces. So shortening videos, moving interactives out of different spaces so that the flow would be, better paced. So we wouldn't have to worry about people bunching up on each other. Other infrastructure changes, new filter systems, new, plexi coverings around, the concessions or the info desks or the box office windows. Just a host of infrastructure exhibit changes. And then, one big kind of behavioral piece with all this, we've always been a walk-up museum. We've never had to really worry about, the time ticketing that needs to be a focus now. If we're going to measure, our guest flow, we need to better know when they're coming. We don't want people waiting outside in 110-degree heat for lengthy periods of time. So our external messaging and our ticketing system had to change quite dramatically too. So whole host of operational changes.
Wow. A lot of work. I know you've been working like the Dickens on this, and I'm sure lots of others are learning about these things too. I'm going to flip this over to Myron now, because Myron, you're still a little bit in it, right? You're still in that, trying to figure out how to open, and live entertainment is a little different ballgame. And I'm just curious, what are you thinking about right now? How are you thinking this is going to reopen? Because quite frankly, we all can't wait. And we need to get back to seeing live entertainment.
I know. Thanks, Craig. We have had to make some painful decisions, including furloughing the majority of our staff starting next month when our PPP loan runs out. And it looks like there isn't going to be another second wave of PPP loans. So if that happens, we're going to have a whole bunch of people that will be furloughed for a time period. We said from the beginning that theater is not a social distancing sport. You don't go to the theater to sit, 6 feet away from other people. You go to laugh when other people are laughing, and have that social experience of seeing friends and neighbors in the theater. And that whole theater experience is really about convening a group of people who not only want to be entertained, but are in it. You like I say, laugh when others laugh, you cry when others cry, you have this shared experience. And for that reason, we knew early on that we would be among the very last to reopen. We kind of accepted that, had to accept that as a premise. Simultaneously, I was still working on this committee of all the venues, the entertainment venues in Las Vegas, that, run the gamut from the Raiders and the Golden Knights to the National Finals Rodeo, to Cirque and all of the rest who are trying to answer this question. When are they going to allow us to reconvene and put on shows again? But more importantly, what's it going to take on our side to get it done? And, commercial venues are looking at it a little differently than we are. I mean, if casinos are open and people are playing machines and going to restaurants, even in a socially distanced way, then they're starting to think maybe their entertainment offerings should reopen as well. And there are a few of the smaller venues that are starting to open on the Strip. But Craig, I will tell you, in the planning process, I'm proud of our team who has kind of led the charge, certainly locally and around the country, in terms of planning for reopening. We have a 52-page document that details every aspect of our business, from parking and queuing to making many changes that we're working on now, like touchless payment systems, tickets that are on your phone, kind of like a lot of us do with the airlines, where you can just scan yourself in as you walk in the door, and you don't have to hand someone a ticket and they touch it and they give it back to you. So there's an awful lot of that kind of thing in the works. I heard you mention, or Jonathan mentioned, plexiglass. Why didn't I invest in plexiglass 6 months ago? It's hard to get. Everybody wants it right now. And then they're just the obvious things. We invested in some of these electrostatic cleaning machines produced by Clorox. They're big machines, and they're able to, get in the nooks and crannies and provide a kind of a sanitary surface in places that you can't get, kind of between cracks and all, with a rag. So we've invested in that. We've made lots of changes to our just daily protocols, even for those who are working, and almost all of us are working from home these days, but those of us who go into the office, we are temperature checked, and all those protocols that the CDC recommends, we are doing them. And so we're doing all of this not because we like the idea of sitting on the sidelines. We hate it. We hate it. The idea that I had to announce the postponement of Hamilton broke my heart. I mean, we all were looking forward to the return of Hamilton for those 5 weeks in September and October. There was no way that we were going to be ready. And frankly, there was no way that the cast and the crew was going to be ready. And so let me just wrap up this part by saying that that's a really important part to us. We don't want actors coming from the road, from another city, getting each other sick, getting our stage crew sick, getting our patrons sick. We don't want people buying tickets and coming to the Smith Center and passing along COVID to someone else. As hard as it is to sit on the sidelines, or as I keep calling it, take an extra intermission, we know it's the right thing to do. Now, my last word on this part is, it also breaks my heart that we don't have a venue at the moment for our beloved resident companies, or the Nevada Ballet Theater or the Las Vegas Philharmonic. And we don't have a place for all of those local musicians who work at the Smith Center on a regular basis, whether in the pit, in the orchestra for a Broadway show, or in the mini bands like Lon Bronson and Frankie Marino and Clint Holmes and all of our friends who bring their musicians to the Smith Center. I hate that we're not paying them, right? Because we don't have any tickets to sell. We have canceled over 200 shows so far, canceled over 200 shows. And Craig, that means that we have no income, and we have very high expenses. We still have to pay the electric bill, and we still have to cool the place, at least some, during this time of year. And we have to have our security team in place, and all of the rest. So it's a tough time, but it's an intermission. And Craig, for you and those who have said, we can't wait to get back, we can't wait to see you back and to greet you again in our lobby. So thanks for doing this. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you, Myron. Yes, your challenges are certainly a lot more difficult than many. And I so appreciate you being so candid and open with what you're going through, because I know it's got to be hard. And as you said, it's breaking your heart all the time. Mike, so you're working with people all over the place in lots of different cities, which opened in different times. And, what are the organizations that you work with? What are they doing? What are you seeing as best practices in terms of their preparedness for operations and reopening?
Well, we're lucky enough to work with Jonathan in the Mob Museum, so I'll just start off by saying that best practices are typically whatever Jonathan and his team are doing. So I'll start with that. But I think while it's been, we work with many clients, I think in most cases it's been very similar as far as what they went through and what they're going through. I think on the financial side, the immediate reaction was all about, cash burn. How are we going to minimize our cash? It then kind of transitioned very quickly to what are the government programs out there and how can we, get some relief from the government. All of our clients but one was able to apply for the payroll protection program. The only one that wasn't was tied to a university because of the university's situation. They weren't able to receive it. They all were able to get the payroll protection program, which again bought 2 months basically worth of time. But now, and Myron just mentioned it, as this payroll protection program is about ready to lapse for most of them, it's just they're going to have some very, very tough discussions with many staff right now, because whether they release them, furlough them, those are the kind of the ongoing discussions we're having right now. And I think, the silver lining is most of our clients now are doing some real strategic planning as they're coming out of this, and mainly around their staffing. And one of the things that we are really focusing on is, and I know this is about revenue, but you can't control the revenue in the short term. And, are they going to come back? How will they come back? What you can control is your cost structure. So we're doing a lot of discussion around how do our clients transition from a fixed income or a fixed cost model into more variable-based model. So, if they're going to have to release a lot of people when they're bringing them back, more part-time than full-time. Instead of having custodials and security on staff, let's think about outsourcing that so you have the ability to ramp up or ramp down as demand comes or doesn't come, depending on the other. So we're doing a lot of planning around fixed versus variable-based costing. We're doing a significant amount of sensitivity planning and scenario planning. What happens if it's 25% versus 50%? And what are the ramifications, and what are the decisions we would make differently if it's one versus the other? So there's a significant amount of scenario planning going on. And then that's more on the financial side. On the operational side, and I think Jonathan touched on it, a lot of it is what we call population plan. How many people can you physically get into the different spaces, galleries, lobbies, etc., with all the different social distancing requirements in there? And, it's not as simple as just putting that up on a map. You got to make your best guess on dwell time, which in each of these different areas. So, are they going to, be in the lobby for a minute or 10 minutes? Most of our institutions have elevators, and that's somewhat of a choke point. How are you going to do your elevators right now? Is it just household? You're limiting to household, so you can only get people up or down one at a time potentially, or four at a time. So there's a lot of operational planning that we're integrating with our financial planning. So, we can do all the scenario analysis we want on paper, working then with their COO or their guest service provider and physically going through the museum, as they think the guest might, is one of the big things we're doing. And then that goes back to the staffing as some of them are reopening, or most of them are going to be opening probably more in July than they are now, is, what additional staff are we going to need or want to make sure that it's a safe environment, social distancing is required, things like that. And where can we bring in new technology? There's a lot, I think Myron and Jonathan both touched about a time ticketing system, cashless and touchless systems. All of that is being discussed. Some institutions we work with were early on in that. Jonathan has something. We're early on in all that. Yeah.
We're prototyping an interface for using your feet.
Oh yeah.
pedals
Yeah.
For the interactive instead of actually touching it. It's going to be great.
Well, that's some of the things that we're, again, I think most are going to like these stylists, so you don't have to touch it, and that's awesome, and that's great. But, so it's the integration of all the operational planning using both, your staff and new technologies or advancing technologies you already have to make that experience safe and maximize the throughput. Because again, most museums, ultimately, it's about how many people can you get through the door. Most of these museums don't have, and we'll talk about this later, a digital platform that they can monetize. So, how do you, do some throughput analysis to maximize it, but all do it within the safety requirements that we all are undergoing right now.
Wow. Yeah, there's just so much to think about. No question about that. I'm going to stick right with you, Mike, though, and ask the next question. So what challenges are you seeing in these institutions to try to find ways to create new or alternative revenue streams?
The biggest challenge is the people. Do you have the right team to execute on potentially new revenue streams? I think that's the biggest thing. Jonathan mentioned it earlier. I think COVID-19 woke everybody up to the importance of diversified revenue streams. And when we think about that, we think about that in kind of three big buckets: earned revenue, so admissions, retail, food service. Contributed, so your typical donor giving whatever they give, and then government, that can be in the form of grants or other things like that. And I think when you look at those three in whole, and then you have the underlying subclasses within each of those, you have the right people and the right team to execute on those. And in most cases, they don't. And so, the institutions we work with that don't have a lot of earned income, they're actually benefiting now because they have the endowment income or they have grants or contributions. But they were using this time to think about how do you bring in earned income, because something else is going to come around the corner. So maybe they think about hiring a chief revenue officer they never had. For our institutions that were relying more on earned income, they should probably be thinking more about bringing in grant writers or grant writing, or maybe hiring another additional team of chief development officers or chief management. So I think that's, to me, the biggest challenge is having the right team execute on the new revenue streams that everyone's thinking about.
Wow. Yeah. Well, all businesses are dealing with this similar thing too, is how do you find ways to keep your people employed? How do you find ways to be of service and continue to find new things that the market is shifting on all of us? And so, Jonathan, I'll jump back to you for a second. What do you guys see in terms of alternative revenue? I know you've been doing some unique things. How's that going? What challenges do you see in that?
Well, I think it's going well so far. I actually have a couple examples of what we've been spending a lot of time on our Mom Museum hand sanitizer. You can you see right there that we've, the distillery down in our underground, our speakeasy area that tells the story of Prohibition. We've converted that to a space where we are now producing hand sanitizer, which accomplishes a few things. First, this is one of the elements of our safety protocol. It's a value add. It's something we tout. We give every guest that's coming through the museum now one of these, along with a complimentary mask. We've got our Mob Museum masks. We don't make those on site, but these are items that are part of I think address a number of needs simultaneously. One being this is a healthy, safe environment. Two, it's a fun environment still, because that's a critical component of people coming out. It's not enough for people to feel comfortable. They gotta feel like there is still that vibe and energy and excitement, and that this is a fun, good way, quality way for us to spend our time. But it also will become something that we're able to sell. We've already started to sell it without even formally introducing it to the marketplace as an item that is for sale. I will say that that in this world now, nothing is easy, nothing. The hand sanitizer as an example, the liquid's 4 ingredients, and then there's only 4 other, components of this, the bottle, the pump, the cap, the label around the outside of it. Sourcing these materials, the supply chain today is nothing like it used to be. It is ridiculously difficult. So making certain you can work your way through finding the right sources and vendors so that not only can you get it produced once, but if you're going to introduce a new product into the marketplace, that you're going to have the sustained supply of the necessary components that you're going to be able to continue to produce it and sell it, because it's not something that we intend to simply sell on site. We will hopefully put this out into other retail outlets and into hotels that are a way of us generating income and also promoting the museum. That's just one smaller, I shouldn't say it's a small example because it's been a focal point for us, but kind of taking it back to what Mike was saying and the inherent challenges that go with this, I think, and the opportunities for this time. I mean, I do like to look at the bright side of this, which, one part of the bright side is that when people can't do the jobs that they ordinarily do, it kind of breaks them out of that mold that they're in. We want to be able to put our people and our best people and our most creative people to work on whatever it is that is in the best interest of the organization so that they're not boxed in. I mean, so much of what inhibits us in all of these, any of these initiatives, and whether it's in a crisis or just kind of steady state, it's the mindset that people have. People have to be able to feel like they have, they can imagine new things, that they have permission, that it's safe to experiment with that, that, you don't have too much of, this is my job, I don't do that. And I think that's something that we work hard to cultivate in the museum as, frankly, one of our core values, bold thinking, that you shouldn't be inhibited by, believing that something is too hard or that we can't figure out a way. And I think the other piece of that too is that when you rethink what you're doing, you have to be prepared to scrap what you've done before. And too often we get, too attached to the things that we have, and we don't necessarily want to blow it up. It's painful to blow up your store and turn it into a queuing space, or to take exhibits that you really love and mean something to you, and that perhaps you have invested time and effort and energy and emotion into creating. But often, if you can get past that, you can create something that isn't just about solving a problem in a crisis, but is actually an improvement that will last over time. I think if it's, in terms of other things that constrain us or kind of challenge us during this time period, I think what we also wrestle with as we're trying to, so our attention turns to how can we generate new revenue? What are new initiatives we can explore to grow our business? We're also wrestling with, not being on stable footing. And most of the time when you're thinking about a new endeavor, you're coming at it from a position of strength. You have your base operation is stable. You're in a position where you can invest. We don't have those things right now. So you're kind of trying to, on the one hand, imagine new things you can do and start a new business, while you're also trying to figure out how to fix, repair, what's not right in the existing business. And also doing it in a time where kind of the rules of the game are changing. If it was a year ago and you were introducing new online programs, so we're going to do a virtual summer camp. It's a great concept, I think. It's something that, if it were a year ago, would be much more novel than what it is right now. You have so many other venues that are simultaneously trying to turn their attention to how do I compete in a digital space, virtually, that, there's so much more noise to cut through and so much more competition that you have to figure out. And I think that the other, just a couple other things that we wrestle with in this new environment in terms of kind of challenges for our new revenue streams. And I think, understanding our base consumer and how our audience segments is evolving also. We had comfort before of what our consumer looks like and the things that they're looking for in a venue. And that's changing now. You've never had, things like the divisiveness of the mask. There are some people out there that, won't go someplace without it, and other people that resist it. And what else does that tell you about the consumer behavior and what they want when they're in your venue? So trying to understand that and see how we can serve these folks differently, continues to be a challenge.
Wow.
And I think the last thing I would say about this is the connectivity part. I think we're all getting very used to this Zoom, and we like to think that we can work effectively this way. And I think we have some productive meetings and discussions. But I worry about how we are going to kind of create when we don't have, it's one thing to have a good brainstorm or discussion in a meeting over Zoom. But we know that so many of the good ideas don't happen during the meeting itself. It's in the hallways afterwards when people are bumping into each other. And if we don't have that, I think that is going to be a problem for us. So.
Wow, thanks. Myron, Jonathan mentioned big and bold, and boy, that describes the Smith Center as well. And what a huge vision and a huge undertaking you already went through just to get there. And I'm wondering, what are you thinking about now in terms of maybe the opportunities to create new revenue? And also, what are you hearing from colleagues in other cities? And, I know you have connections to Broadway and to other places. What are you guys collectively thinking about how you're going to sustain these organizations that we absolutely critically need?
There are a lot of questions in that question, but I'll do my best. Let me first say that when it comes to kind of other revenue streams, I see that we had a question, or I had a question about, could we, someone posted a question, could we take shows that have been at the Smith Center before and take the video from those shows and host them online and charge people a fee to watch shows that have been at the Smith Center digitally? And the question is a good one, but the answer, unfortunately, is no. We don't have kind of stock footage. We don't tape every show. We're not allowed to. When it comes to Broadway, there are 16 unions involved in the production of a Broadway show. We simply can't do it. We don't have the tapes to start with, and the idea of broadcasting them even digitally is something that we've never been able to make that happen in the past as an industry. So there's that. And a lot of people are asking questions about, how can you make some money during this down period? And we've talked about, virtual dinners, invite people to a Zoom call, and 50 different families are all in the Zoom call, all eating dinner at the same time, talking about, pick your topic, Broadway. And maybe we invite somebody, Lin-Manuel Miranda or someone, to talk about their show. And while that part of it's kind of interesting, I'm spending my life on Zoom these days. I mean, every day I've got at least 3 or 4 Zoom meetings, and a lot of them are with the people that you're talking about, Craig, my peers around the country. And we are having this conversation in some cases multiple times a week, but certainly every week, where we're asking questions about, not only when will we open, but when should we open? The Broadway League, while they were talking about giving refunds for tickets purchased for Broadway shows on Broadway through September, the truth is it wasn't long after that they made the announcement that Broadway wasn't going to reopen. Broadway in New York wasn't going to reopen in 2020, that it would be in 2021, and people assumed that meant January 1st. It probably isn't January 1st. It's probably going to be a while. And so that applies to the Smith Center and the Orange County Performing Arts Center and the Denver Center for the Performing Arts and all of our peers around the country. The truth is, if these top shows aren't touring, and when I say top shows, I mean not only the first run touring Broadway shows, but the touring bands and attractions. Carol Burnett does not want to get on an airplane right now and fly anywhere, much less, a small tour of a few West Coast cities where, she included Las Vegas on that tour this fall. We're not going to see Carol Burnett this fall. And it's not because we didn't want her. It's because, when you get to a certain point in your life, you don't want to subject yourself to the possibility of getting sick. And so we're seeing a lot of that. So part of this decision was ours. Part of this decision was the industry, and that means including the tours that go out. How do we make money in the interim? I love the fact that, we were talking earlier about kind of government sources. We are at a time where that makes sense to me. The Smith Center has never depended on kind of government funding. We've been fortunate to have raised a lot of money to build the place, to design it, and open it. And we have donors and sponsors who have been very nice to us to allow us to do what we do and charge the ticket prices that we do. Craig, I don't know if everybody on the call knows, but our total ticket sales only cover about 70 or 75% of our total expenses. And that's because we do all the education programs for the school district that we don't charge for, 100 or 200,000 kids that will come through the doors of the Smith Center and will ride their school buses and be all excited about the experience of coming to the Smith Center. We do all of those things, and we keep our ticket prices as low as possible. And it means that we've got to raise $5 or $6 million a year just to break even. Imagine how much we have to raise when we don't have any revenue coming in. And so we launched a campaign. This is not a pitch. Okay, it's a pitch. We launched a campaign to raise some money for the Smith Center. And we've asked people that have come, they've seen shows, they've enjoyed themselves, they've sent their kids on field trips, that maybe they consider making a donation of $10 or $100 or $1 million, whatever they can do, just to get us through the dark period. Here's the thing. I said a few weeks ago that we would be dark indefinitely. And that headline, if you didn't read the story that followed, that headline suggested to some people that the Smith Center was closing. The Smith Center is not closing. We're taking an intermission, and it means, yeah, we're closing for a period. We're not doing shows, but we are reopening. There's no doubt about it. And when we do, I think we will, to use your phrase, Jonathan, I think we will go big or go home, just like opening night at the Smith Center included Jennifer Hudson and everybody else. I think we're going to do some things to celebrate the fact that the Smith Center is in fact reopened, and we're off to the next chapter or the second act of the Smith Center's play. So we're going to be okay, but it means that I've got to find ways to raise money, because there's no way we can earn enough with, charging $5 or $10 to tune in for a digital talk back. I wish I could see everybody who's joined us. I would ask for a show of hands, but I know no one would raise their hand if I said, who wants to pay $20 to tune into a Zoom call and listen to me? It's like, we're not doing that stuff. And my last word on it, I'm sick of those things too. I mean, everybody feels like if you're a performer, you need to be online and digital and you need to be performing for your people. I get that. And that's very nice of them to do that and to stay in contact with their people. But when audiences are accustomed to the highest quality sound and lighting and everything that goes with a night out at the Smith Center, and then you say, all right, we're still going to give you a show and it's going to be from my living room, and it may or may not sound very good, and you know, it's just going to be the little camera in my laptop, and so, you know, it's not going to look like a network television show. I kind of think our job at the Smith Center is to just wait and give the nice people of Las Vegas what we've always promised them, and that's the highest quality shows.
Hey, Jason, I see we've got lots of questions and our time is cranking through. So can you maybe ask a couple of questions that is coming on the chat?
Sure. This one's directly for Jonathan. Jonathan, how much traffic have you seen since you opened on May 29th? And do you have a kind of a ratio between locals versus out-of-towners?
So we're basically running at about 25% of what we ordinarily would for this time of year. Of that, the ratio right now is approximately 40% locals versus non-locals. Under ordinary circumstances, our locals would be between 10 and 15%. So the local component is actually about where it should be. Obviously, the non-locals are not. Yeah. The good news is that they are spending more than they ordinarily would. So of those that are visiting,
stock up on the hand sanitizer.
there's some disposable income there.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to know. And this is a general question. Is there been any projections on realistic projections? I'm not sure anyone knows, but when will we believe audiences will come close to what it was before it was in the past? The numbers.
Anyone want to take that one? Mike?
You know what, let me jump. Yeah, I'll take a pass, although it's, you know, like you just said, Jason, it's probably a guess. But, you know, what we did do, we went back and looked at past crises and do some research and due diligence on those, and then how quickly or lack thereof did the recovery take place. And so we went back to like 9/11 and the financial crisis, and you know, a couple specific, you know, the shooting in Las Vegas, Katrina in New Orleans, and they were all relatively different. But for the most part, it was about a year to recovery. I think here we're expecting it, you know, from our seat, probably longer. You know, I think this is very different than anything we've seen in the past. How quickly will people get on airplanes is a big question. I think most of the traffic is going to be more regional based and more drive up than normal. So a tourist attraction or a tourist museum like the Mob Museum or World War II or some of the others we work with, you know, they got to probably just switch their marketing to more of a regional or drive up than a national tourist base. But, you know, again, the studies we did, it was about a year, in some cases less than that. I think what we're doing, just to be conservative, is we're kind of running it out over a 24-month period right now.
See, I look at this and have come to believe that the reality is we don't start to come back to where we were until we get herd immunity, a vaccine, or at the very least a successful treatment that means that if you get COVID, you don't end up in the hospital on a ventilator. And most of the medical experts are saying that you know, the vaccine is still a little ways off. And depending on who you listen to, if you believe that the vaccine is around the corner and we'll have it in 6 months, then I think in 6 months, we'll start to see people getting comfortable with going back to their norms. I don't know about you guys, but last weekend, I went to Target and Walmart in the same outing. And I will tell you that I noticed a distinct difference in the consumers in the two stores. At Target, most people were wearing masks. Some were wearing gloves. In Walmart, most were not wearing masks. None were wearing gloves. And I don't know if that's a political statement or just says something about the demo of those two stores. But to me, that says a lot about kind of when the arts and cultural segment might find its way back and what it might look like. And I guess what I'm suggesting is, I believe that a museum attendee, a performing arts center attendee is more likely to follow the rules. And if the rules are, you have to wear a mask and you have to let us take your temperature when you come in the door, that those are all important things that they will say, yeah, it's worth it to me to be able to come in and be a part of this experience with those requirements. So I guess my answer to the question is, when do things return to normal? It only starts with the vaccine and probably takes 6 months to a year after that before we're back to normal.
Jason, if I could just jump in, I actually agree with both Myron and Mike. I think that under ordinary circumstances, Mike's assessment, I think, is a good one. I think the rub here is that, this isn't a singular event. It's not like other events that they happen and then you're in a recovery. This is, there's so much uncertainty about how this is going to play out. We're going to see, in the fall, or maybe even sooner, depending upon how this, all of these opening ups, how this experiment plays out. Does it create a resurgence, or are we on a path where we can trend back to what used to be? And I think for that reason, I think we haven't been through something like this before, where we've had to plan for so much uncertainty and volatility, and frankly, to the degree of impact that this can have. Because what happens if there's a scenario where we continue to build back? It's maybe slow, but we build back, and over the next year we get back close to something that where we used to be. There's another scenario where come October, come November, we have to close up for a couple of weeks. And maybe it's even, this can even happen more locally. It's, if you have an outbreak in your facility and you're not able to operate your facility for a couple of weeks. So I think it's, I like I have the optimistic view, and I also have the prepare for some pretty rough waters view.
Thanks for not calling that the Myron view.
So I did have another question that's related to that, Jonathan, what you're hitting upon, that notion of a second wave. And it's a direct question, so you don't really see it. And this is about, are there examples of online events that are profitable or that could be done in the event of a second wave? I don't know if anyone wants to tackle that one.
I think I said it already, not for us. I will say this, though. My first call of the day this morning was with a television producer that we've done some national TV shows with, who's interested in doing something that would kind of symbolically represent the reopening of Las Vegas with the reopening of the Smith Center, another big national TV show. It doesn't help me in the interim, but I think you guys get my point. We're kind of accepting of where we are now. Jonathan may have a completely different view, because I think museums have the ability not only to open and to socially distance, But there may be things that, Jonathan, you can do digitally that people would love.
I think, just, a couple of thoughts about that. I think we're going to be looking at kind of hybrid events. We've done programs in the past and live streamed them, but maybe there's, some other model where you have, some smaller number of people in person that have, a certain type of access and experience, and there's a different way that you can engage people remotely. I think there's also, again, I'm not like, I think this is hard, and there are a lot of people in a lot of organizations that are simultaneously trying to figure this out. But is there some way in which you can equip people? So as we think about, a summer camp, for example, that has some component of, of live interaction virtually, digitally, some type of video interaction, but maybe also some type of kit that we deliver them that, as we've all seen these different kits that are, people get sent, that have some kind of, game or activity component to it. And I think that there are ways, but it's a competitive landscape, and it's going to take a little time to figure it out. I think that, the key with it is what is unique about your respective institution, and how do you extend that to people without them physically being there. So the degree to which, we can do something that differentiates from the other products that are out there because they're connecting to specific exhibits or specific people, the experts, the advisors, the people on staff, and the other people we're connected with, it's
Yeah. Sounds like there's no silver bullet answer for that. It's specific to each institution.
Hey, Jason, the other thing I would add, though, to that, I think, we are suggesting for most of our museum clients that they absolutely enhance and start developing their digital platform anyways. Because I think the consumer, even before COVID-19, was going in this direction. So and I think this is more of a longer term play. So we're not suggesting you do something just, for potentially a relapse or a second wave. It's more of, again, the strategic planning during this situation. What can you do differently, and how do you rethink about it? Digital platform is something we think most of our institutions should be thinking about. Doing it the right way, content driven, as Jonathan said. How are you going to be differentiating in your programming than a competitor? And if you're able to do that now and get it up and running the right way in advance of the second wave, great. But even if it's not a second wave, hopefully, you're still figuring out another revenue stream, another way to engage your audience that probably is a great and is the long-term play anyways.
If I could just piggyback on that, I mean, I think it's important to remember, as difficult as it is for us to figure out what that actual product or service looks like, the consumer need doesn't change. So there are still, we know that there are groups out there, organizations that would love to, in the past, come and have an event at the museum, and have a private event, do a scavenger hunt, some other type of activity. Because that group can't travel and assemble, doesn't mean that they're not still looking for something to do together. So there's got to be some way to address that need.
Hey, Jonathan, we unfortunately had to go to 3 different brides, 3 different wedding parties, and let them know that we were going to be dark. Talk about events you don't want to cancel.
No. Got a number of those too.
Yeah. Jason, I think we got time for one more question from the audience if we have it.
Okay, and then maybe we can, I know we had a couple other questions. I wonder if there's a platform for us to get those out in the email that follows this. So we have 2 questions, but I'll have to go with the first one that was here. In addition to implementing new technologies and operations, are there plans to renovate areas to facilitate these requirements?
Anybody want to take that one?
I think Jonathan did talk a little bit about this in his
Wait,
preparation.
we always want to renovate. Craig knows that. No matter what, we're going to renovate.
Mike, what are your clients doing? I mean, is there serious renovation going on around this, around dealing with COVID, or are people kind of, we're advising our clients to do some temporary measures, but to kind of hold a little bit because we don't know where this is going. The level of uncertainty is really hard, and I'd hate to see people spend money on something that they don't need. And,
Yeah, well, most of them don't have the money to spend, number one, right now. So I think that's the biggest issue. And then number two is there are mandatory things that they have to do regarding social distancing and health requirements, you know, the plexiglass, the all of the different graphics on the floor, the graphics on safety. So there's a lot of that going on where they're spending, a couple $100,000 that they have to do related to everything here. And frankly, most of them don't have the money to do anything. And I think your point is the right one, Craig, is that no one knows really how, is this a long-term thing? Is it short-term? So most of the ones, I can't think of any right now that are actually doing renovation in a conjunction with this other than what is mandated for health and safety reasons.
Craig, along that, for some reason I hear me, but I see somebody else on the screen. But let me say that yesterday the country of New Zealand announced government funding for the arts and cultural section or sector. Sure would be nice if something like that happened in our country. I mean, the truth is this sector is vulnerable. It's tough. And I worry that some of these groups in the museum and the arts sector may not make it through. So in the meantime, I hope that, I talked about, the campaign for the Smith Center, but I hope people will, when they can, help out, the Mob Museum or the Nevada Museum of Art or Broadway in the Hood in West Las Vegas, who's doing great work. And of course, the Nevada Ballet Theater and the Las Vegas Philharmonic and all the others that really can use our help right now just to kind of get through this COVID intermission. It's a tough time, man.
It sure is, Myron. Thank you so much for doing that. One thing I will say, guys, we have 50 people on this call. If all of us gave to our favorite institution something right now, it would help them all out. Quite frankly, the cultural institutions in our community are what make life worth living. We need to find a way to make sure that we keep them thriving, and so that when we are coming out of our houses and we are coming out of our state of fear, that we have these places to go to, because they're what bind us together as a community.
Thank you.
Agree, and I encourage our panelists to take a look at the chat. There's a lot of support there. You have a lot of people who I'm sure are in the same mindset there.
Yeah. Well, guys, I think we're going to wrap up this, but I wanted to give each panelist one final thought of what you might think, the people that have tuned in, how could they help you? What do you think? How can we connect together better as patrons of the arts? Myron, you want to start?
Well, I think I said my piece about helping the local nonprofits who so much need our support right now. So let me leave you with the fact that Hamilton was postponed, not canceled. Hamilton will be coming back to Las Vegas, and you can say that you were in the Zoom where it happened when I announced that. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, no, I hope you weren't recording then.
We were.
Sorry, we're still recording.
All right.
We have the option of cutting that off.
Mike, can you give any final thought here?
I mean, I think I've said a lot. I think as hard as it is today, I think, and it sounds like Myron and I know Jonathan, be optimistic. Everyone's going through a tough time. As leaders of your organizations, lead the way of being optimistic about what you're doing. And I think that's, you know, we all have to kind of try to find that silver lining and take advantage of whatever we can here, and whether it's strategic planning, new revenue streams, whatever. A lot of people are having a real tough time right now, and I for good reasons. But we need to show strong leadership to be able to come out of this and be successful and thrive again, and we will. And I think I just encourage everyone to just be optimistic, find that silver lining, and continue to lead your organizations as successfully as you did before all this craziness.
Great. Well, as risky as this is, I'm giving you the last word, Jonathan.
I think much of it's already been said. I guess I would add that, you know, to the degree that you know, as Myron said, that folks can help respective institutions with a direct gift, that's wonderful. But beyond that, if people are comfortable getting back out there, you know, get back out there. You know, places are open, and I think, you know, we've all, I think, gotten used to not consuming, you know, not going to restaurants, not going to, you know, not going to museums and other, you know, just other entertainment venues. And, you know, I don't think there's ever been a time where, you know, our fates are all linked like they are now. I mean, usually, you know, organizations go through crisis, you know, independently. And it's not like right now where we can only be as good as the marketplace is good. You know, until people start coming back to Las Vegas and feel good about that, and, you know, we're all going to continue to struggle. So I think we need to lead the way.
Great. Well, thank you to our panelists who gave their time to talk to us tonight about a lot of really important things. And I can't thank you guys enough.